So, welcome to the second National Institute for Leadership Advancement webinar. In this particular webinar, we'll be focusing on SHPE chapter success, in particular the national reporting program. My name is Mauro Rodriguez. I'm one of the NILA education program co-chairs, and we're going to wait here for a good 1 to 2 minutes just to make sure we give people to jump on the call, on the webinar, I should say, and then we'll get started here at 7:02. What is it? Central Time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, welcome to the NILA webinar number 2. We're going to talk about SHPE chapter success and the NRP, and the actual aspects about the NRP that are very important and relevant in preparation for NILA. Okay. So again, this is the second out of the 5 NILA web videos that are provided to members in preparation for the entire SHPE year, where the SHPE year starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th, in this particular case, on June 30th, 2020. And it's all within alignment with national and regional efforts, in particular the SHPE national mission, the national strategy, and all of the regional tactical plans throughout the country. In our last webinar, we talked about the NILA educational program. We went through the schedule, just a high-level overview, in particular the major objectives for NILA. And then we also talked a little bit about the upcoming assignments related to the Certified Leadership Program. And I pretty much highlighted that the NILA mandatory assignments would be discussed at the second webinar, and that's what we're going to be discussing as well here in the final slide of this webinar, where we're going to be talking about SHPE chapter success. Just looking further into the future, next Tuesday, which will be July 16th, we'll be talking about the chapter management tool, which is the CMT. How to develop it, and then also how it's developed, and also how to prepare for it, and specifically as it relates to NILA. And then on Thursday of next week, July 18th, the SHPE Programs Department will provide its update in terms of all the programs that are on a national scale, both on an episodic and a continuous level. Actually, today we're going to be talking about one of those nationalized programs, which is the NRP, which is one of the continuous programs within the programming portfolio within SHPE. And then on July 23, which is a Tuesday, there'll be the NILA conference logistics briefing provided by the SHPE event staff in regards to more of the granular level details in terms of what to wear, what things are going to be happening during what days, and with more specificity than I had provided in the first webinar last Tuesday. So we're going to jump right into the brief history of the NRP. And so the pre-2010, the NRP really wasn't the NRP. It was called the End of the Year Report, and then there was also another continuous program, which was called the Blue Chip Chapter Program. During that time, the EOYR, as it was known back then, was episodic, meaning that it would only happen once throughout the year. The chapters had to combine all of their work into a 50-page document, and then they had to submit that document during the end of the year for most chapters, both student and professional, which was in the, I would say, May to June time period. And then they would hear about the outcome of the reports sometime during the SHPE conference. Back then, it was also had different names, the conference. It was known as the National Technical Career Conference, NTCC, and then it evolved into the SHPE conference, and now it's the SHPE convention. So a lot of history has passed over the last 2 decades. And so we went from this episodic program and then this continuous program. And then in 2010, we thought we need to really merge these two into a full continuous program, particularly because there was a large set of disadvantages with both of these programs. The Blue Chip Chapter program struggled in terms of management internally. Specifically, it was mostly volunteer-led, and it was hard for the chapters even then to keep up with the program. And then the EOIR provided a lot of great documentation for the organization, and also a lot of great effort had to be put in by the chapter side, but there was no real feedback loop. There was no real way to connect back if the chapter knew whether or not they did good. It ended up being, or well, during their year, it was always, you find out next year. Well, by next year, there's a new board, there may be a new chapter advisor, there may be a whole new dean at the university. There's whole turnover that could happen so rapidly that the chapter would say, well, we're under a new different operation, so it's the feedback that we could have received, if we received it at all, what may have not been that fruitful. So we needed to increase the frequency rate of the feedback, and then we also needed to decrease the amount of labor that had to be put on by the chapters to actually submit these reports. And so this was one of those major setbacks or disadvantages of this report. And then on the other side as well, in terms of evaluation, it took a lot of personnel and a lot of the personnel's time, mostly volunteer-based, to be able to provide that kind of feedback to the chapters. And actually being able to provide really good feedback was also something that the program was, both of these programs were struggling with. So in 2010, with the help of the National Affairs Committee, which actually to this day oversees the National Reporting Program, we merged both programs into the first iteration of the National Reporting Program, renamed both of these, and to merge them and renamed it and rebranded it as the NRP 1.0. It significantly, distributed the overhead in order for chapters to participate, where they had to submit 3 reports per chapter, but instead of providing 3 reports at the end, you would provide them throughout the year. And unfortunately, the way it had been organized at the beginning, it was we had a really small report, around 15 pages at the beginning of the year, midterm report around 25, and then an end of the report at the end of 25. But it still allowed us to provide some kind of feedback at a monthly turnaround rate for the chapter, 2 to 3 months turnaround, so the chapter could see the feedback. However, this was useful for chapters, and we did see chapters improve through this program, we noticed very quickly that there increased the overhead on our side, or the volunteer side, to really review the reports. And so in 2013, 3 years later, after doing some serious modifications during this time, the National Affairs Committee, in conjunction with the CEO of the organization, or I should say the National President of the organization at the time, this is pre-merger, which happened in 2014, the National Reporting Program 2.0 had emerged, where we had streamlined the program to become far more accessible for the chapters. We reduced it to two submissions per chapter, 25 pages each, and then we actually were able to provide a report template to make it easier for the chapters to understand what they need to provide, and then it still enabled this 2 or 3 month turnaround. I would also say that we're now really past this stage. At the end of 2016, we entered NRP 3.0, where you don't have 25 pages anymore. You actually have 7 pages. So we reduced it even further to reduce the overhead on the chapter side, and really only ask the chapters the important, most pertinent information and data that we really want to request from you. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I do want to talk about the state of SHPE student chapters, right? What did we learn over these last decade, approximately decade and a half, these last 15 years? What have we really learned from the student chapter side? For all of you attending the call, and the same thing is applicable to in this diagram as that I'm presenting on the slide now, as it is for the professionals. But I'm just going to talk specifically about the students here just for a second, which is that for the student chapters, we had approximately 260 chapters as of 2010 or so that were chartered since 1974 inside of the SHPE system. So inside of all of the SHPE system, we had 260 chapters that had been chartered and that had been approved by the National Board of Directors. And that accounts to, on average, more than 15 chapters in every region in the United States. The chapters inside of these regions would range from being 2-year community colleges all the way to the top engineering 4-year institutions in that region, if not within the country. So you had this very, very wide spread in terms of the capacity of the chapter, the resources available to the chapters, and it's something that we're still seeing to this day of chapters that are sometimes even down the block from a whole nother chapter, which is incredibly strong, has a tremendous amount of resources, and the other chapter doesn't have those. And yet there's not that availability to communicate or be able to be transparent about what is the chapter's health, what does their participation look like. and what is really the symptoms that attribute to their inability to be able to grow, or is it something within their control or something outside of their control? What we then noticed is that around, on average, 150 chapters, student chapters, are active every year since 2010 in the system, from 2010 to now, where if you apply the appropriate definition, active is based on 10 members registered within SHPE Connect. However, what we do know is that participation in the NRP is required by all chapters as part of their compliance and affiliation that is stipulated within their within their chapter bylaws, that they participate within the NRP in order to be affiliated with the organization. And so what we really see is that, as you can see, these numbers are going down. We're going from 260 to 150, and every year we steadily start seeing the NRP participation on average being around 120 chapters, 110 chapters, depending on what year you look at. But since 2012, what we have been seeing is that after us doing these improvements to the NRP, we're increasing more and more participation by the chapters every year. And so our hope is that we can really begin to use the NRP, the National Reporting Program, as the leading metric of measuring activity within the organization. So an easier way of saying that is that instead of just having 10 members within your chapter, what really matters to show that you're being active is that you're participating in a documentation ecosystem that's more transparent in sharing of best practices that enables your growth and also enables you to put your name out there within the system. That really is a defining attribute of your affiliation with the organization, and more importantly, of your participation with the organization, and you're trying to realize its SHPE mission. So thus far, about 80% of all of the active chapters, based on this criteria up here of 10 members, are actually partaking as of 2016 within the NRP. And we're hoping to aim for greater than 95% of all the active chapters based on this definition to really participate in both reports by the year 2022. And it looks like we're hopefully going to get there with a lot of your help. I want to quickly say a little bit more about chapter best practices and behaviors. Another thing, I love these diagrams because they really show us, or I hope they show you, how to really start thinking in terms of cycles, and specifically vicious cycles that have feedback systems that really attribute to the chapter's growth. And so something that we've noticed over the last 10 years that we've documented in terms of chapter best practices and behaviors is that it really comes down to these three major attributes that attribute to a chapter being able to really grow in size, and more importantly, grow in its ability to provide the resources and the development and the access necessary for the students and for the professionals to be able to realize the SHPE mission. For students, ultimately that relates to post-graduation success. For the professionals, that means career upward mobility, right? And also providing impact within their community, positive impact within their community. And so the first thing ends up being support and development. So we're going to start here, this light green or teal region here, support and development. What does that really look like for both student and professional chapters? Well, it means that you have a strong SHPE leadership filled with alums as well. They're supporting alums, both for professional students. You have a strong chapter advisor and a committed university leadership to specifically to the Hispanic student body within the College of Engineering, School of Engineering, etc. That the student chapter or the professional chapter has industry sponsors or support, as well as that a lot of those sponsors and the people providing support are actually alums of the chapter, whether it be student or professionals, and that there's community support and representation. And another thing that we've noticed as well is that you also have a large, and by large here I really mean greater than 5% relative to the overall community, Hispanic representation in the community, and as well as in STEM within the chapter, specifically for student chapters. So you got to have this backbone, this strong support and development ecosystem around the chapter. That's probably the first ingredient, but that's not everything. Many people would perhaps say that's all you need, that's enough. And you're like, no, that just prepares one of the ingredients for the conditions to make it necessary for the chapter to actually have a seed in the ground and be able to then grow. What you need next, the next ingredient you need, as opposed to just having the soil ready, you really need the seed, right? And the seed is the awareness and access, right? As the students at the university level have supportive resources and a full ecosystem available to them, that they're aware that ecosystem exists for them, that they're aware that there's financial methods for them to gain funds to be able to run their events. The same thing for professionals, that there's mechanisms within their chapters, within their community, for them to be able to actually implement events and be able to attract money as well. The other big thing is that they have a well-developed talent development system. Now, when I mean talent development, I really mean one way to look at it is succession, right? That you're developing the upcoming students, the upcoming professionals. If you have a young professional or a host of young professionals who just came out of college, who are now entering into the workforce, you have a strong development system encouraging them to become leaders within the chapter. If not leaders, to be at least be active members within the chapter, right? That they gain the value, that there's a value system entrained within that talent development system for them to actually have quick access to the value, and then ensure that they're succeeding within their place in the workforce, right? The other big thing that usually is not always talked about is that there's equitable distribution of access to resources among all the other organizations. Not just SHPE, and that SHPE is not the only one receiving all the resources, but rather there's equitable distribution to other sister organizations such as NSB, such as SWE, as well as being able to provide incentives, very strong incentives, to collaborate among these other sister organizations that we have. So this is another thing that needs to be part of the seed in terms of the soil to the seed and the access, awareness and access here. And then that can then lead to also having proactive chapter mentors, again through the alums, and then having proactive advisors that are being aware of what's going on. Now that's always challenging for advisors sometimes because they have a wide range, and this is for student and professionals, have a wide range of activity and responsibilities that may overwhelm them, but as long as you have an advisor that's present when they need to be present, then you can start being able to see the seed being planted. So we start from the ground, the seed's being developed, and then you need the sunlight. The largest sunlight that you can have is knowledge, and to be able to build knowledge and methods to actually allow for the conditions to be readable for this chapter to really begin to grow, right? It's part of this overarching cycle that we have here on the right side. And the biggest thing here is that it comes to really changing of a mindset where the chapter transitions from thinking from event to event to thinking more systemic, to thinking more about systems, thinking more about cycles as I have here, thinking more on a program level, not just thinking about we have one event, what is our next event going to look like? It's rather, no, how do we connect these events into an overarching program, right? And what is the outcomes of that program? And why are we having that program? And why do we even need that program? Really asking why on multiple layers or multiple tiers to be able to understand why you're doing things, and then being able to gain data to then be able to show that why you went about doing this in a systematic way, in a programmatic way, to be able to realize the SHPE mission statement. So as complicated or as extreme perhaps as that could sound, we have seen over the last 10 years that the strongest chapters have developed a very strong tribal knowledge system within their chapters that enable them to really have a strong talent development system. So by the time the students, by the time professionals enter into leadership positions, they are all well inculcated in the systems and the knowledge base that's there for them to be able to execute very complex, perhaps, systems and programs, if not even develop new ones for the chapter, right? And so we've seen that happen, especially amongst the strongest chapters. And additionally, the mentorship and post-graduation success for chapters becomes more oriented around that, and they develop a culture around that thinks about SHPE and its mission for what it truly is. It's about upward mobility, social economic upward mobility for all the entire Hispanic community towards achieving social parity within STEM, and not just about trying to get a job, right? It's beyond that. They've been able to make a very strong connection and a strong association with the value that the community that SHPE provides to them, and it's not just simply a workforce attainment opportunity, right? Okay. No, so now what we've seen is that if you connect this directly to what chapters have in the system, if you look at the conditions I mentioned before, the soil, the seed, and then the sunlight, what we've seen is that when chapters have only the soil, for the most part, they're usually they're usually categorized directly correlates to their finances. And so usually if they only have the soil, they don't have the tribal knowledge carryover, they don't have the awareness and access, they don't have developed a systematic programming mentality, they end up having a small chapter budget, around $15,000 or less. And typically what we end up seeing as well is that their chapter also ends up being pretty small, right? Now, many of you might think, wow, 15,000, that sounds like a lot. Well, you have to think about the number of people that have to go to conference or go to the conventions or the RODCs, go to NILA, be able to And there, a lot of that funds tend to go there. Approximately, you can only take around 10 students at that point with this budget, or perhaps even less, to all of those conferences. And in addition to that, you have to be able to run events. Right? You have to be able to spend and invest a little bit on the events to actually make them good. The food goes into that. A lot of things go into that. And this applies to both student and professional chapters. And so when we map that, we see this, that the soil usually if only the soil is present, only the small budgets are there, and the chapter ends up being small. If the soil and the seed is ready, the students have and the professionals have awareness and access, and then there's equitable distribution to access to the resources, the chapters can scale to having larger budgets, $15,000 to $30,000. And again, we're accounting for everything here. We're not just accounting for the budget that they have to run events. We're accounting for all the budget for them being able to take people to conferences, et cetera. And so at that point, we see them in terms of being medium sized. They also having a little bit larger membership, and you'll see a little bit of that later in the slides. And then for the large chapters, the chapters that are very large in size, they have over 50 members. They have a strong talent development system. You can really see that they have like robust university funding resources and a full, incentive ecosystem for them to be able to collaborate with others. Their chapter usually has a corporate funding brochure every year in order for them to gain more resources. They have a large and expanding portfolio of programs in order for them to attend conferences, and sometimes, and most of the times, they're usually data-driven. And they have a very strong alumni and corporate contact base for which they can always tap into to gain more funds for their chapter. So you can really see the growth here, that it correlates with their size, including with their finances. And something that's really surprising, and an emerging thing that we've seen with some of the strongest chapters in the organization, both student and professional, is that they started creating endowments within their universities for being able to attain scholarships. So it's something that we've also been seeing. So now we arrive to what NRP is. So NRP correlates to a lot of all this information. It really is the state of the art at this time for the organization in terms of the chapter program, the chapters throughout the country, both student and professional. This is the program that supports them throughout on a continuous level throughout the year. And I break it down in the following fashion. We have a why, we have a how, and then we have a what. So why does the NRP program exist? Well, it directly ensures there's mission alignment between the chapters across the country and the SHPE mission statement, right? And then it's in addition to that, it ensures that we're sharing best practices and ensuring full transparency. The chapters can see all of the reports, all of the feedback they receive, and that ultimately it correlates back to us being able to recognize the top tier chapters and then also identify the chapters that are truly struggling and are facing serious challenges. Again, as I mentioned, not having the soil, not having the seed, not having the sunlight to be able to grow as a chapter and being able to realize the SHPE mission statement. And so this is the other aspect of why this system exists. It's our effort to make sure that we have, and then that we have full mission alignment. And then the other thing I should mention, it also is in part to making sure that we have compliance with all the chapters and that they are ensuring that they're realizing their affiliation with the organization. How does it actually manifest? Well, it ends up being us being able to provide a chapter management infrastructure for the chapters, to being able to teach them how to manage their chapters in an effective way. So that's through the CMT tool. And then there's the chapter assessment reports, commonly known as the NRP reports. And then there's a chapter fund development. At this point, it's still in its infancy, where it's just simply a chapter sponsorship brochure. And then we also go through submission and evaluation. Okay, and what does it ultimately boil down to? Well, it boils down to having the national reporting guidelines, a 10-page document, actually it's a 12-page document that stipulates everything I just mentioned, that it provides the templates and the webinars, such as this one, submissions and form, well, it's only one submission form and the deadlines, and then also it comes down to awards and support. I should briefly mention that the National Affairs Committee, also known as the NAC, oversees and manages the NRP. If you ever have any questions, you could always contact us at nac@ship.org. Okay, so here we are. We're at the NRP materials and forms. We're going to start with the what here very quickly. And if you ever need to gain access to the NAC Google Drive link, this is the NAC Google Drive link right here. You click on this link, it sends you to all the documentation you need to see, including the guidelines, the templates, as well as being able to see this actual slide itself. It's actually on there. If you ever need, when you have to submit your items, for example, the chapter management tool, as well as the NRP reports, report 1 and report 2, you have to go to this link, and that'll take you to the submission form for you to submit your information. And then and then when you want to see all the information of all the chapters and all the feedback they received, and then all the scores that they've had, as well as their chapter management tools, you can access that through this link here. And we keep records up to 3 years into actually 4 years into the past. So we currently have in that system, we have, if you click on this Excel sheet, we have 4 tabs that scale back from 2017, 2018, 2019, and now we're approaching 2020, and we'll only keep 4 years into the system for both reports and the CMT tools. Additionally, what I should mention about this specific tool here, this specific spreadsheet, is that the first tab that you'll see, if you click on this, I won't go there now, for we do not have the time. But if you click on that link, you'll be able to see the first tab provides all the chapter awards that the National Affairs Committee has provided for the last 10 years. And so if you want to know which chapter won National Large Chapter of the Year Award, for example, 10 years ago, you'll be able to find it on that link as well as for the small chapters, medium-sized chapters, all the category awards, both student and professional, they're all on there. All the student feedback, all the professional chapter feedback, all of that is on here as well. So everything all in one link here as well, okay? So, as I mentioned before, regarding the NRP, it provides this chapter management framework for SHPE chapters to realize the SHPE mission and vision. And it does this through their activities and through events to ensure there's member participation and ultimately the member success. All SHPE chapters, and I put this in bold and underlined it, are required as part of their affiliation with the organization to participate in the National Reporting Program. And it consists of these 3 major components: CMT, NRP reports, and the sponsorship brochure. And so I'm going to give you a high-level overview of how the NRP works throughout the year, and what is it actually aiming towards, as opposed to just being and not just being for compliance, not just being for you to report back. I'm going to show you why we need this data to be able to further help you into the future. And it starts as follows. We start here at the top of this cycle. We're going to go through the cycle. We start with you learning the value of the NRP, such as through this webinar right now. You organize and manage your chapter and aligning it with the SHPE mission and strategy. We help you through that. Actually, the NRP is set up to help you do that automatically. And then you obtain feedback on your chapter management tool, and you gain support from national and regional leaders. This actually happens at NILA, okay? And then you host your activities throughout the year with your student or professional chapter, and with your programs all oriented around member success. And then you go through NRP Report 2, which is where you report your quantitative accomplishments and provide us feedback. Okay, this is the part where you get to definitely tell us in writing the areas where you need more help, the areas where you need more support, and some of the things that you learned along the way. Those kinds of best practices are very powerful, very useful to other chapters to learn as well. So this is the main mechanism as well, by you putting in writing, for which you make it accessible to all the SHPE chapters. In the long run and in the long game, we collect all of this data and assemble a large-scale data sets to be able to demonstrate that university students that participate in SHPE national programs, to participate in their own chapter programs, have enabled them to succeed farther ahead than they perhaps would have had they not had a SHPE chapter, had they not been active and proactive within the SHPE chapter and within the national programs, including not just the NRP, but also including the National Convention, the RLDCs, NILA, etc. And that could be used for multi-year, multi-million-dollar grants for financial resources for you, the members, for professional programming, for student programming throughout the years. We're not there yet. I will be honest and clear that we're not there yet, right? But we're hoping that by us continually refining this NRP program and through your participation, which is definitely always needed, is the way we will get there, and perhaps in a year or less, we will be able to achieve this kind of hallmark. And then from there, once we gain this data, once we gain your feedback, it helps us adjust the regional tactics and the national strategy. And as a result, we go back into this cycle. So we go from the top, and then we go through the events, and then the chapters speak, and then we also go straight up, and then that affects the national strategy as well, and the overall regional tactics that are implemented throughout the region. So it's a full feedback system, feedback loop that leads to future development and also ultimately realizing the SHPE mission statement. Now, how does this apply to SHPE chapters? How does the SHPE chapter see this? Well, the way you see it is pretty much the way I was detailing before. There's the start of the SHPE year. You then do your CMT tool. This is in SHPE Q1. This is the quarter 1 of the SHPE year, which starts again, as I said before, on July 1st. and every quarter here spans for 3 months. And then we go to NILA, you have an alignment session, then you ship Q2, then you have your ship national convention, then you have ship quarter 3, where you have the NRP 1 and feedback and RLDCs, and then we also have national and chapter elections, right? And then ship Q4, you submit your NRP report 2, you give us feedback, and then you also go through your election transitions, then we start the year again, and then you go through a chapter management tool as it helps you through the transition, and then you ensure alignment here again after completing your transition. So the top half here is really focused on transition, where the bottom half is focusing on execution, okay? So expanding this out a little bit more, I'm going to show you the little cycle here once again, the cycle I showed you in the previous slide. I'm going to zoom in on CMT. Every one of these boxes is really a microcosm of activity that's happening every year throughout the ship year. And I'm not going to go through each one. I wanted to go through each one, but we don't have the time. so I'm just going to focus on the chapter management tool, where we really focus on what is the CMT tool. So the CMT tool focuses on effective transition. And it does this through the SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis that every chapter does inside of the CMT tool. And it also provides the board information and also their social media information, etc. And then within that CMT tool, we're able to we're able to grab all of the chapter plan information, such as ensuring the ship mission alignment, your chapter management system and your goals, the ship the ship pillar smart objectives, how you organize your event and your budget, and then how you streamline your meetings that you actually have. And the CMT tool is to be used continuously throughout the ship year, as is used ultimately as your chapter's e-board or executive board meeting agenda. It's required that you participate in order to be eligible for the awards in the CMT tool, but you're not evaluated on it. Only feedback's provided in terms of how you use the CMT tool. Okay. And all of this is really this one diagram. While it may look complicated, it's actually it's an Excel sheet. Okay, it's just a glorified Excel sheet, but it has all of this theory captivated, all of it in there and streamlined pretty well. Okay, the national chapter reports are 7 pages, as I mentioned before. There's 2 of them throughout the year. It's required you submit a PDF. Now for the awards, as opposed to what used to take place almost a decade from now ago, was that the chapters simply went to the conference, NTCC or the ship conference, and now they go to ship convention, would simply find out during one of the events, hey, you got an award, and it would be more of a surprise. We wanted to shift the entire paradigm on that and said, no, chapters should self-nominate for awards. They should feel that they're very proud about what they've accomplished, to the extent that it really establishes as part of their culture to really put themselves ahead, to nominate themselves and moving forward. And we've noticed this, that it's actually an attribute of the Hispanic community that sometimes we don't nominate ourselves as much as we would have. And it's also attributed to what we're seeing for example, in the Ship Star Award. Sometimes we don't see others, members of our community, nominating others or encouraging others to nominate. So in an effort to really transition and transform the culture here, we put this into the NRP of ensuring that there's a self-nomination in order for you to be required to even receive the award. If you don't self-nominate, you don't get the award, even if you have an excellent report, right? So it is required. For the deadlines, NRP Report 1 is January 15th, and NRP 2 is June 15th. These have been the exact same deadlines for a little bit over 5 years now. So we don't plan on changing them anytime soon. There are conditions that do apply where we do provide an extension, and you can see those in the NRP guidelines. We provide all the details regarding that. And then for chapters that are submitting for the first time ever, say, for example, they've just been chartered recently, then we also provide additional support for them directly from the National Affairs Committee in terms of their ability to submit the reports. Okay, and as I mentioned before, the NRP rubric is actually located inside the NRP guidelines, and then here's a submission form that I provided before in the past. The reports are to be submitted by the deadline, and of course, submissions after the deadlines are still eligible to get feedback. Regardless, as long as you submit, you'll always get feedback. But what we cannot guarantee, if you don't submit on time, you may not be eligible for awards. So you have to make sure that you submit on time if you want to be eligible for the awards. And just as a recap here, some of the things that we're looking for, I really wanted to highlight the SHIP chapter at the University of Illinois in Chicago back in 2016, 2017, that provided this in its appendix as part of its self-nomination. And actually, this document that they provided, this figure that they provided, this diagram, was really one of the major things that stood out to all of the reviewers that reviewed the report as the leading attribute of what we're looking for in the NRP. And I wanted to provide it here just to give chapters, both student and professional, a snapshot of the kind of things that we're looking for, where they itemized and they enumerated a lot of, or quantified, I should say, all of the data of all the things that they've achieved throughout the year, including how many people attended the national conference, how many people went to the regional conference, how many members are subscribed to their newsletter in terms of marketing, the sponsorships, all of this information they aggregated into one very, very nice graphic. And so I just wanted to give you that as an impression of something that you could do within your chapter by the numbers page that's inside of the NRP report. And so I'll just simply say about the NRP evaluation process and the rubric. The evaluation process is that you'll always have at least 2 evaluators. They're going to report your NRP report. One of them is going to be one of the members of the National Affairs Committee. There's only 2 members, so it's me and Karen Siles, who's the NAC chair. So either she and I will also be one of the reviewers of your report. And we will provide, the evaluators will provide feedback to your chapter on the quality of the report and also in terms of your best practices that you've been enacting. And then the NRP rubric is provided in the guidelines. And here I'll just give you a quick snapshot of what it looks like for all the components. That there's a 3-point rubric for each of the components, 0, no submission, 1, below quality, 2, at quality, and 3, exemplary level of quality. We don't provide intermediate digit we provide single integer score points. So we don't provide things like 0.5 or 0.75. We don't do that. We do either 0, 1, 2, 3, and that's it. As you can imagine, there could be ties of scores. People could have the 2 different chapters could have the exact same score. And that's what the self-nomination is for, to enable us to be able to delineate between the 2 chapters and identify which one is the one that will receive a particular award. For the NRP report items, we have the following. It's a 7-page report. The cover page, we don't provide you any points on the cover page, but it is required, and you just provide your chapter contact information. Your chapter accomplishments page, it's worth up to 3 points, as I mentioned before, based on the rubric. You summarize all of your annual chapter's activity and your accomplishments in words. So all this is in writing. You can even see it perhaps as an executive summary, but we prefer to call it a chapter accomplishments page so that it makes it clear of all the accomplishments you achieved throughout the year. And then you have your chapter by the numbers page. I hope that the title here makes it clear what we're looking for. We're looking for numbers, looking for data, quantitative data. It's based out of 3 points, and then it summarizes the chapter's numerical accomplishments or quantifies their accomplishments. And you can see that in the template we provide further guidance. I will not be going through the template here you can actually access that template now through the links I provided in the past slides. And so then there's the support needed and lessons learned. There's 3 points allocated for that, 1 page. You communicate your issues and also the lessons learned from SHPE National. And then there's 2 letters of recommendation. You can see the NRP template. Each one of them is awarded 3 points. You can see the NRP template for the specific requirements for each one of those letters. And it's of key importance that we incorporated this into the NRP report in order for us to really see whether or not the chapter is receiving the support that it needs to receive from either the university, from the workforce of your professional chapter, and also from the community nearby, right? So this is why we've incorporated these letters of recommendation into the system. And then there's the SHPE award self-nomination page. We don't provide any points for that, but it is required in order for you to receive SHPE chapter awards. And it's based out of 15 points for each chapter NRP report for a combined score of 30 points. And that's actually what you see here. When you look at the report evaluations and the NRP items, there's a CMT tool. We don't provide no points for that. NRP 1, NRP 2, 15 points each for a sum total of 30 points that you could potentially win or be allocated. And then to ensure that there's equitable distribution amongst all the chapters, as I showed you before regarding the different budgets, going from the small budget chapter, the medium chapter size, and the large chapter size, to ensure that we're adjusting for this in a fair and data-driven way. We adjust for that using we adjust by that not by your budgets, but rather by your membership. And so we classify small chapters having any range from 10 to 25 members for student chapters, and then for medium, 26 to 75. Anything greater than 75 will be a large chapter. For professional members, it's a little bit smaller. 10 to 20 is small, 20 to 50 is medium, and then 50 and above professional chapters is classified as a large chapter. Our hope is, and this is if I can have a few moments just to tell you, our hope is that the professional chapter, the student chapters we begin to create this pipeline of all of them entering into the professional chapters, and as a result, we can rescale this to be larger numbers. At this time, historically, we have had these same categories a little bit over a decade now, but as we continue to increase the quality of the NRP reports, the chapters can continue to become more systemic in their thinking, and the more values attained by the members, and more of a stronger connection and commitment by the chapter members to the organization and to the SHPE mission statement, and particularly that relates to them being more committed to their community. When they go to the workforce, they're also committed to being part of this professional SHPE chapter, and therefore enabling us to also be able to recalibrate these chapter sizes into the future. Okay, and then in terms of deadlines, the CMT tool, NRP report 1, NRP report 2, these are the following deadlines. They're to be provided by September 15th, January 15th, and June 15th. There's a pattern here, as you can imagine, 15th. And the confirmation of receipt is September 20th. We confirm that you received it by you going to that evaluation sheet, and on the 20th of September, January, and June, you'll see that information posted directly on there. If you don't see your specific chapter posted on there, either you didn't submit it or there was a mistake somewhere, and you have to go ahead and email us at nac@ship.org, and then we can take it from there and help you with the situation and ensure that your information was captured by us in the system. And then for the chapter sponsorship brochure, we don't have any due date. We don't have any confirmation receipt. This is still, like I said before, part of the program that's still in its infancy. And so for now, we just have it there. We're hoping to continue increasing. We just provide you the template for now, but we hope to be able to increase that as we move into the future. And then the feedback, this is the deadlines on us, on the National Affairs Committee. We provide you your feedback by October 1st on the CMT tool. NRP1 will be March 15th by the time we provide you your feedback, or RLDC of your local region, whichever one of these comes first. If your RLDC comes before March 15th, we'll give you the feedback before March 15th. If not, it'll be March 15th. And then NRP2 is actually coming up. I'm actually working on that right now. So the NRP report 2 feedback and the score and such will be provided to you by June 15th. We may have to stretch that a little bit because we've actually had a few chapters that had to request deadline extensions. So we may provide it by June 17th or so. Okay, and then for the awards, okay, so for the NRP, we have regional blue chip chapter awards that are provided. This is actually a historical piece that was part of the blue chip chapter program that we had over a decade ago, and we wanted to keep it as part of the legacy of this program. And so it's only awarded based on the NRP1 only, and you have to score at least 12 out of 15 points, and then you have to self-nominate for it as well. And it's presented at your RLDC by your regional vice president. The national chapter awards are presented at the national convention, right? And here are the actual categories. You have the National Outstanding Chapter of the Year Award, small, medium, and large. And then we have the Regional Outstanding Chapter of the Year Award. And then we have the SHPE Pillars for all the following awards that we have in this, provided through the NRP. Okay, and then here's the links again for the program. Here's the national Google folder where you can find all the items, the submission link, the evaluation, and the feedback as well. And then in terms of mandatory assignments, this is the part where some of the things that you'll have to complete prior to coming to NILA is to complete a chapter executive, and we'll remind you about these deadlines moving forward, is to complete the chapter executive board information, the CMT tool, by July 23. Draft and submit your SWOT analysis, CMT tool. This is available on the link I showed you in the previous slide by July 23 as well. And then draft and submit section 1 of your chapter plan by July 25. And then we'll walk you through this in the subsequent subsequent NILA webinar. And then we have no requirement at this time for the sponsorship brochure. Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'll thank you for your time. Thank you for, I know perhaps I went a little bit fast there, but I thank you for your time, for learning more about the NRP program. And remember to take the NILA webinar quiz. And at this time, I'll stop and ask if there's any few questions that we can answer here to finish the webinar.
Hi, Mauro. Thank you for your presentation. There are no questions right now. You want to give them one more minute to see if they can send them in?
Yes, just one more, 1 minute for them to quickly type it in here and then see if they have any questions. I'll actually go back to the previous slide here to make sure that people can see the material links for the NRP, and then I'll go to the next slide so you can see the mandatory assignments. As I mentioned before, we'll talk more about these in the next webinar next week, Tuesday.
Okay, we have one coming in. Is the link for the webinar questions emailed to us?
Yes. Wait, sorry. So say that again. Is the link to the webinar?
Is the link for the webinar questions emailed to us?
Oh yes, the quiz. That is correct. So yes, it is emailed to you. So 1 hour after we finish the webinar, the NILA webinar quiz is emailed to you. You'll say, thank you for attending the second NILA webinar, and then here's the link to the quiz. So it will be emailed to you.
Okay, thank you, James, for that question. This one comes from Emily, and she wants to know, how do we access those NILA assignments?
Yes. So these assignments are actually the chapter management tool. And so I'll walk you through that. So the first thing I'll say is that what is a chapter management tool? So what it is ultimately an Excel sheet. And so if you go into this NAC Google folder right here, this link I'm looking at, the first blue link that you're seeing here, go in there, you'll have the NRP guidelines, you'll have a template there, which is an Excel sheet called the chapter management tool, right? And you'll download that. You'll download directly to your laptop or into your system, and then you'll go ahead and work on it. And inside you'll see that it has the first tab has the README page about how to use it, and the second tab has the chapter executive board information. The third tab has the SWOT analysis, and the fourth tab has the chapter plan. And so we'll talk more about that. And so don't feel overwhelmed when you download and go, oh my, I have to do all this by myself. It's not like that. More or less, we're going to actually be talking about it in the next webinar. You're actually going through it in detail. For now, I just wanted to make you aware that the assignment is there. You can read the NRP guidelines. You can read the actual, the Google spreadsheet actually has a lot of comments on there that actually help you and guide you along on how to fill the information. So if you want to get ahead, which I always encourage you to do so, you can start on it now, right? But if you feel like, hey, this might be too much for me right now, I'll just wait until the next webinar, then that's perfectly fine as well. Because in the next webinar, we're going to go into it a little bit more detail. We're going to walk with you through that process. So that way you're not completely lost as you're navigating that Excel sheet.
All righty. Our next question. This will be my first NILA, and I was wondering about the mandatory assignments. I'm nervous that I may not be able to fill them out to what is expected because my chapter is having a rough time starting this year.
That's perfect. I think that is the first thing I would tell you is to not to worry too much and to fill it out to the best of your capabilities. And so you'll see that there's going to be chapters that have done this year after year after year for the last 5 years. So they have a baseline to work off of. They know what they're looking for. They know how to populate it. They go through it very fast. And you'll see other chapters that are struggling a lot to even go, wait, what is this? And it's because, the same kind of things that I've shown you in the previous slides, where there are chapters that have a lot of experience to the point that they have a lot of programmatic tribal knowledge that's transferred to them, and other chapters that are pretty much starting from scratch all over again. And so what I would tell you is, make sure you look at it, make sure you review the actual CMT tool, make sure you're familiarized with the Excel sheet and the tabs and the such. And to the point that when you come to the next webinar, we'll be talking about it in greater detail. And if you're not able to complete it on time, that's perfectly fine. Let's say it takes you up to NILA. You're at NILA and you still haven't had it done. I would say that's okay. And I would be happy with you. I would say, hey, how much did you get done? Like, hey, I didn't complete it, Mauro. I only got up to like the third tab. I would say, hey, that's okay. The stuff that you did you write some stuff down? Like, yeah, I wrote a lot of stuff down, but I just didn't get a time to finish it. I would say that's perfectly fine. That's great, because then we can actually have a lot of conversations about how to help you moving further into the future, right? And saying, okay, well, then we have enough to actually just get the conversation started, and for you to talk with your regional vice president, with your regional student representative about how to move forward into the future. So I would say, don't let the word mandatory scare you too much. It's mandatory that you start it. It's mandatory you look at it, right? That is mandatory. It's mandatory you put something down on paper, on the Excel sheet, I should say. That's the mandatory part. It's not mandatory you complete it, okay? I would say start it, write something down, get as far as you can. That's what's mandatory.
Okay. And that concludes our questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again for your time. I look forward to seeing all of you at the next webinar number 3. Thank you for your time. And remember to take that NILA webinar quiz. Thank you.